how God just orchestrates everything. I can assure you of this. If Jesus Christ, the incarnate in the flesh God, were in this sanctuary next to you, some of you might have responded different in worship. And if you're honest, you'd say, yeah, probably. I mean, if Jesus walked in and stood next to you, it would alter what we do. It really would if we are in his presence. It absolutely just changes things. So I'm curious, how many has ever played that game Waldo? What is it called? Where's Waldo? Right? I think I have a picture, right? And I'm not sure. I thought I had to get one with Waldo because has anybody ever played that game? Raise your hand if you play it, or you have that book. Where's Waldo? Is it hard? No, not too bad. Yeah. You know, you try to find him. He's like everything looks like Waldo in that picture. I'm not sure if you could find Waldo in that picture, besides the big Waldo standing there. I'd have to spend a little bit of time. Maybe somebody can see it better than I can. But it's a fun. I've played it before. I actually have that book. My kids and my grandkids even like it. It's called I Spy. You try to find things, I spy the binoculars, and you look for it, and you're kind of like on this search. I think there should be a game called, for Christians, Where's God? Instead of Where's Waldo? Because I think it's equally hard for some of us to find God. We all know the answer to that question, but the reality is, where is God? Are you able to see God? I would challenge some of you. We have some people that are, in case you're wondering, we have some people that are at the garage sale this morning, and so they're trying to help Selena finish up and get done with the garage sale. Some people that are camping for Boy Scouts and different things, and so we have a lot of people out this morning. But I want to challenge you guys to kind of play that game, Where's God? In the next few weeks, I really want you to spend some time. Would you be able to spot God somewhere? Somewhere moving or doing something, somewhere that's active and something that's happening. Sometimes we don't even realize that God is present and he's active and he's doing something. In fact, I do a Bible study with a few ladies on Friday, and we were looking at a text in our scripture, and it's when Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb, and even the disciples that go to the tomb, and they see that it's empty, and they are distressed. They're upset because it's empty. And so, why are they upset? Well, because their Jesus is gone. And the reality is, what they're looking at is actually very victorious. You and I know that because we get to see the whole story. But if you were the disciples or Mary that went to the tomb that morning and it was empty, it was a very fearful moment. It was a very distressful moment. It was, our God, our Jesus is gone. They've taken him. And so what appears to be to them a devastating sight. Are you with me? But really, what they don't realize is what they're seeing is the risen, that the tomb is empty. Think about it today. Why do we celebrate Easter? Because the tomb is empty. Right? We don't get together once a year at Easter and everybody cry and mourn and wail and right? We're not experiencing what they experienced at the tomb. What they experienced at the tomb was devastating. And many of you have experienced devastation. Many of you have experienced heartache. Many of you have experienced the unexpected. And you don't even realize it's very possible that it could be something quite victorious. What looks like something as devastating like it did for the disciples. Right? We don't always recognize God's activity. We don't always recognize that God is doing something in our lives and in our situations. So I kind of challenge you in the next couple weeks to find God. Kind of like you do find Waldo. You're like, well, that kind of looks like Waldo. That kind of looks like a God thing. And here's the deal. You can't cheat. And I'm going to ask you, in a couple weeks, I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, okay, tell me where you found him. And if any of you says, you know what, I found him in church. Duh. What do you have, the preschool edition? Hello. Come on. Go to the advanced level. Let's do a level 5, where's God game. Right? I'd love for someone to come back and say, man, I just had this extreme trial, but in the midst of it, I realized that God was there because of this or because of that. I mean, like I said, let's not do the preschool version. Let's do the college level version, right? And really try to find God. So I just challenge you to do that for the next couple weeks. Psalm 139, which many of you probably know this psalm. This is a psalm written by King David. Boy, if anybody was close to God and knew God's presence, was King David. King David. And so in Psalm 139, a lot of us know it because Psalm 39 is the psalm that we use often to celebrate life because you were knit in your mother's womb. That's from that psalm. But really listen to this psalm. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. Listen to the language that David is saying. Listen to how David is talking to God. And think about how you talk to God. David says, God, you've searched me. You know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar, even though you think God isn't aware of your thoughts and your motives. You discern my going out, my lying down. You're familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Some of you are like, ew. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, wherever he goes, God is there. Even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand holds me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. This is the verse most of us are familiar with. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me, how precious, how valuable. I want you to hear this language, you guys. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. How precious to me are your thoughts. You know, it's interesting. I bet you some of you would say amen to that. I bet you some of you would say, if I asked you, how valuable is what God thinks to you? And I bet you every single one of you are going to say, oh, it's so valuable. And I'm going to say, oh my God, tell me how much time do you spend seeking them? Not much. So it's real valuable. Right? What you seek is what you value. Now David, oh my gosh, David loved God. I love that verse. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? King David knew where God was all the time. All the time, King David, if you really listen to that psalm, there is a oneness between King David and God that few of us will ever experience in our lifetime. He knew such an intimacy with God. There was such a closeness with God that David could not escape it even if he wanted to. That's what he's saying. I couldn't flee from your presence. That's how close as they were one. You know, King David is referred to as a man after God's own heart. He sought the heart of God. That's what he was known for. Could you imagine such a closeness and a continual awareness of God's presence in your life? You know, I think one of the songs that we sang this morning, Holy Spirit, says, make us aware or something of your presence. Make us aware of your presence. It's easy in church because we're singing about God. You may not like singing. You may sit there and just doze off or whatever it is you do during worship, but you're still in a sanctuary where we're proclaiming and we're singing and we're talking about God. It's hard not to be aware of God. Now, some of us get up and we like to go and leave and try to busy ourselves with other things, maybe to, whatever. But the reality is, if you're in here for any length of time, you're going to be aware of God. But to be aware of his presence, really his presence right with you all the time. King David had that. He knew a closeness and a continual awareness of God's presence in his life. And it's what made King David so faithful to God. King David didn't have a smooth life. The beginnings of his ministry were spent being pursued by King Saul. Constantly, continually, struggling with opposition, but never in the times that he was fleeing from King Saul did he ever get away from God's presence. And God helped him in the midst of even those struggles. I want you to know something, you guys. God's presence will completely alter your life. Now let me say more specifically. An awareness of his presence. Because every single one of you, if I ask you where is God, you'd say, well, he's everywhere. Because that's the answer, right? Or some of you may say, he lives in my life, or he lives in my heart, right? But the reality is that it's not so much an awareness of his presence with you all the time. Again, I go back to, if Jesus Christ walked in this sanctuary, and sat up here, I know at least a few of you would change your seat. If when Eddie said to stand and Jesus stood, I bet you'd stand. Because his presence alters what we do. Jesus' presence I assure you, it will alter what you do. It will alter how you think. Some of you might even come to church out of habit or ritual, and you forget why you're here. Jesus walks in, and you're like, whoa, that's why we're here. I need to stop thinking about my grocery list. I need to stop thinking about what I'm doing this week. I need to start thinking, oh my gosh, Jesus is here. It would be amazing how many of you would be shocked that Jesus is here. That's disappointing. Right? Hello. Let's hope Jesus is at least here. And I know that at least two more of you than me have come here to experience Jesus. So I assure you he is here. You may not be aware of his presence, but he is here and he is present. In fact, him and I just had a wonderful time of worship. It was glorious. Ask me later, I'll tell you all about it. We had some little talks in between. It was wonderful. I am so aware of his presence all the time in my life. But God's presence, let me tell you something, it won't just alter what you do in church. When you become aware of his presence, it will alter how you live. It will alter how you talk. It will change how you respond and react to situations. It'll also alter what you participate in. The things you say yes to and the things you say no to. It will also alter how you perceive yourself. When you have negative thoughts about yourself, if Jesus is right there, and let me let you in on a secret. If you have bad thoughts about yourself, and you're feeling down and you feel worthless and all those things, and Jesus is with you and he's affirming those, that's not Jesus. He may look and sound like Jesus, but that, my friends, is the devil. That's not Jesus. Because if Jesus were present and you were aware and you were beating yourself up, Jesus would say, hey, don't talk about my child that way. Hey, you belong to me. Don't be putting yourself down like that. You put yourself down, you're putting me down. Don't do that. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do it to me. That means whatever, even if you do it to yourself. I love you. Don't talk about someone that I love that much. That's what he'd say to you. Don't say that. It would change how you plan your day. It would change your dreams, your hopes. It would change what you want for your children, your family, how you get involved in what he's doing. It would change if you were aware of his presence, and not just on Sunday morning, but aware of his presence all the time with you. An interesting thing to note, if you read his word, you'd be familiar with this. Did you know that when you look in the Old Testament, that when people were disobedient, when God's people, when Israel, God's nation, when they would turn from God and go the way of the world, when they would go to do the things that they want to do. Now listen very carefully, because this is still true today. You need to think about something. I'll tell you this right now. It is absolutely true today. But in the Old Testament, when they would turn, do you know what God's punishment was? Was to remove his presence. He would remove his favor. He would remove his presence from them. That's what happens to you and I today. If you want to live according to however you want to live, you want to talk how you want to talk, you want to dream how you want to dream, you want to participate in things that you want to participate in, even though you know full well it goes against God. God's presence leaves you. You know, because there's a lot of, because we don't know this word, there's a lot of fallacies, false teachings in our Christian culture today. And one of them is God will just go with you wherever you go. That, my friends, is a lie. If you're going to go on your own, if you're going to go into places that he doesn't want you to go, he's not going to go into that, because some of us believe he'll go in there, I'll go with you and I'll protect you. What? No. God says, you want to go? Then go. I don't want you to go. I'm going to do everything I can tell you not to go, but you're going to go alone. And so this is why, stop blaming God for things. He loves you enough to let you go and do what you want to do, but his presence essentially gets removed in those situations. I'll tell you this, a church that isn't seeking God, God isn't present with that church. It's just off doing their own. And they may be very successful. They could be a church of 1 million people. But if it's not seeking God and his presence isn't there, then it's a church without the presence of God. And so that's one of the things that's really interesting when we think about that, how powerful his presence is. So powerful that it was the very thing he used to punish, was to remove his presence from God's people. And when they would turn back towards him, his presence would be restored. And they would have favor in their life. And they would experience God's blessings. They would experience God's abundance because they were seeking God and his presence. Because God's presence in our life, you guys, is very powerful. His presence is very powerful. Think about it. Read the Gospels. Wherever you see Jesus go, wherever Jesus was present, somebody was getting healed. Somebody was encountering God. Lives were being completely changed by the presence of God. His presence will completely change your life. But you need to become aware, because again, if I ask you, where is God? Everybody has the same answer. Well, God is everywhere, and He lives inside each and every one of us. And, those are great answers, but are you aware that He's there? Are you aware that He's there? A while back, I mentioned in a sermon that when we see God's power displayed, it almost always followed obedience. And I don't know how many of you remember that. But when we see God's power in the Bible, like for example, somebody think of something really powerful. There's a small enough crowd today, so let's do this. How many of you think of something really powerful that you know from the Bible? Parting of the Red Sea. Okay, so parting of the Red Sea, probably that's got to be up there in the top 10 of the most powerful things. And if you don't believe me, I'll go out to the lake with you and you do it. So, it's pretty powerful, right? And I'll even go to a pond. I'll do it with a cup of tomato soup, like Bruce Almighty. If you can part the tomato soup, I'll be impressed, right? But the parting of the Red Sea, that followed obedience. And the obedience was, go in the water. Step in the water. Put your staff in the water, Moses. And they did. In fact, what was even more powerful was that, probably 1 million, 2 million people went through on dry land. That's crazy, right? Went through on dry land, and then Pharaoh's group goes through, and he kills the enemy right in front of him. But all of Israel is spared, and then, and you know what? It was a powerful thing that happened because of the presence of God. But it was God's power followed obedience. Certainly, we have Noah, right, and the flood. Abraham, the birth of Isaac, and then the sacrifice of Isaac. Think of all these things that have happened. Moses, not just the Red Sea, but the plagues and the obedience of putting the blood on the doors. And God's power was displayed that night. I mean, amazing things happen when God's presence. See, God is, we see, in fact, you hear people, we said this in Bible study last Wednesday, we always hear about how, you don't see miracles like you do back in the Bible. How come we don't see those today? Well, to a point I agree, to a point I disagree. Because God is moving all the time. Y'all woke up this morning, that was a miracle. You're all breathing, that's a miracle. And so all of these things are a miracle that happens in our life. These miracles. But miracles are happening, but are we not seeing some? Sure, I would agree that some of us are missing out on the power of God, but because we want God to do miracles in spite of us. In other words, we don't want to have to obey. We want God to part the Red Sea without us having to do anything. Look at all the nations. Look at Jericho. Joshua, God said, this is what I want you to do, Joshua. You're going to go into the city of Jericho. You're going to march around it 7 times. 6 times you're going to do this. On the 7th time, you're going to do that 7th day. You're going to go around 7 times. You're going to blow a trumpet. Joshua's probably like, slow down, professor. I got to take all these. That's a lot of rules. Right? He's writing it down. He didn't even have a Palm Pilot or a whatever you call these little smartphone things, right? And he's writing it, okay, got to do all these things. And he says, when you get around, okay, I'll bring down the walls, you go in and take over the city. There had to be somebody in that group that said, just blow the trumpet, Joshua. I don't really think it matters if we go around 6 days, on 7th day, 7 times. Just blow the trumpet. No. God said it, we need to do it. They would have looked like fools if they stood out there just blowing a trumpet. They would have been mocked and laughed out of the city of Jericho. But they did, and the walls came down. God made the walls come down, that's it. He didn't make it so that anything flew into the city. He didn't make it